Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the February the 7th. March the 7th. Well, the meeting is regularly scheduled. I don't know how regularly scheduled I am, but in any case, welcome to the meeting. It's March the 7th. I'm going to call the roll as our clerk is incapacitated tonight. Robert Waldman, I am present. Stephen Riley.
Present.
Diane Butler.
Present.
Mr. Svakianudis. Present. And we welcome a very new commissioner, Mr. Quentin Cummings.
Present. Thank you.
Alex Klein is not present. So we have more than a quorum, and we are ready to proceed. We have an agenda. I'll briefly summarize the agenda. Under primary old business is the city dock design findings and opinion approval or disapproval. Under new business, we have to deal with our annual report, which has been circulated. And we also have with us this evening Mr. Eric Smith, who will provide us with a...
Tom Smith?
Tom Smith. Eric Lashinsky. Tom Smith.
No. Eric Smith, right?
Stephen Rice.
Mr. Rice? Yes. I'm sorry, I got your name wrong. My apology. Mr. Rice is here to present an annual report on progress under the Maritime Zoning Act. Any communications, and then an adjournment. So do we have a motion to approve an agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second? Second. And all in favor say aye.
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 All right. We have minutes which have been circulated and have been, I presume, reviewed from the February 1st meeting. Are there any modifications to those minutes?
I made some modifications, but I think they were incorporated.
Okay. They were. All right. Hearing nothing. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? None. All in favor of approving those minutes, say aye.
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 Any nays? There are no nays. So it passes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 0. So moving on to our important matter tonight. There are no public hearings scheduled, so our important matter tonight are the findings and opinion of the City Dock Major Site Design. The draft has been circulated to you with plenty of opportunities to make comments and anything, additions, deletions, subtractions.
So I made an addition, probably 1 o'clock today, and it just added the fact that we are not reviewing the Burtis House, nor are we looking at the Harbor Master in our review of the plans. And while I inserted that information into the minutes, I didn't insert into the first draft of our findings that information. So I think it should go someplace at the beginning, and I don't have a copy handy, but when you describe, or we describe the project, you do a good job of explaining the geographic location, but I think we should insert a sentence just indicating that it doesn't include those two buildings.
On the first page under factual background.
Yep, right at the end of the paragraph.
In the third paragraph, nor does the application include the privately owned properties from Donner Park to the Eastport Bridge. These properties have compromised street addresses. In fact, the first sentence also says that the application does not include a parcel at the foot of Dock Street that extends to and includes the foot of Prince George Street and ends at the Naval Academy. Also, someplace in here, I don't know if I can find it quickly, but it does mention that the Harbor Master building is being removed and that it is not a matter of the site design application, where it's being moved to. And so I don't know.
End of page 2, last sentence, second to last sentence.
Good. You've had a lot of time on the airplane to read this.
Okay, as long as it's in there and with the harbor master and,
It is, and I think it's also mentioned someplace else. Okay, it is someplace else. I just can't
was that on your?
put my hands on it right now. Here, page 4, under D, minimize adverse impacts. Must be noted that the relocation of the Harbor Master Building to a yet-to-be-proposed Maritime Welcome Center is not included in the application. Hence, the Planning Commission cannot comment on the future impacts of such a facility.
Yeah, I think that's been a really important
Yeah, as long as it's, I mean, it's
point
kind of
since
buried
the
there, but,
beginning.
yeah, but if it's in there, I don't really care, as long as it's in there. So we have we have the harbor master and we have the Burtis House,
And,
both mentioned,
yep.
as not being part of our plan development review
Right.
or site design review.
Now, there are a number of conditions that were talked about, and I would like to raise something at this point. It became evident that the Dock Street parking lot, as it is now, is a crucially important gateway to the rest of the park. And we spent a good bit of time talking about how important it would be to do the best that the city can do to remove the electrical utility poles and underground them. And it occurred to me in the interim between last meeting and this meeting that in some future, the Dock Street parking lot may be in some way turned into a park, and that all of the parking may be removed. And so under our rules, we can make modifications to our conditions and our votes by a majority of the people who were there and who voted. And so I would make the following motion, and I will give you some paper so that you can look at it and read it in just a moment. The motion is to add a condition and then renumber a few of the conditions, you'll see. And that is to add a condition that states that the placement of the utilities crossing under the Dock Street parking lot, in other words, the piping, shall be designed to accommodate 2 to 4 trees in a central park area in substantial compliance with the attached exhibit. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to distribute to you a copy of a sketch that shows a Central Park area. It's not in color, I'm sorry to say, because I don't have a color printer, but it is takes off from the sketch which was presented to us and was made part of the record that includes the bus turnaround. And if you look at what you have on a color exhibit, you'll see that the proposed possible Central Park area does not intrude upon the bus turnaround. It doesn't intrude upon the remaining parking spaces. In fact, it's just in the center. But that it could be in the future a small Central Park area, but it would only be really pleasant if there were shade trees. And in order to have shade trees, one has to have soil pits, silvacells or something bigger, in order for them to grow. And in order for that to happen, There can't be piping underneath. I'm assured that that will be perhaps monitored by the existing design team for the park and for the whole dock, and that it probably, most likely will not be a problem. The proposed condition says only that it shall be designed so that it can, in the future, accommodate this small Central Park area, not that it has to be built. I'm saying we need to think about the future, and we need to think about the very real possibility that within 5 years, 7 years, whatever, within a reasonable period of time, that the merchants and people are going to realize that the value of pedestrian spaces is very beneficial to their businesses, and that the parking becomes really unnecessary. Now, there's a lot of design that would have to go into this area in terms of accommodating morning deliveries, trucks, and perhaps a few short-term parking spaces, the bus turnaround, and so forth. So this is just, all this does is say, in the future, if it happens, we need to plan for it now. So my motion is to, as you can see, place a number 18, and then renumber 19 and 20.
Bob, my only comment would be, I like the motion, but could we just, instead of saying 2 to 4 trees, put 4 trees and
No.
canopy trees or large canopy trees? Because they could put, if they put crepe myrtles, we'll be sorry.
I don't want to hamstring or constrain what the future design. All I want to do is, and I do think that in the future, if there is a design, it will be for big trees, because otherwise they're useless.
But or then to just say native trees, native canopy trees, that's fine. We don't want crepe myrtles, and we don't want trees in little rolling boxes.
How about shade-worthy trees?
Shade-worthy doesn't mean native, and I think we want native.
Why? Native could mean a red bud.
You're right, to just say native.
No, it doesn't. I don't want to, I'm not accepting that modification to the motion. Because I don't want to constrain them. I do think that if it's ever done, it will be done properly, and it'll be done, you got view shed issues, you got all sorts of things that you need to deal with, and I don't think that we're prepared and have heard enough to make a decision on that detail.
Can I just ask, so the question is what we're asking is that moving the utilities underground is the number one priority, right? And ultimately, we want the opportunity to turn the parking lot into a park at some point.
Yes.
In which case, we want the ability to put trees into the park. And in order to do that, the piping that the utilities would go into under the park would require a certain layout in order for them to allow for those trees to be planted in the future.
Yes.
So I wonder if, that wasn't part of our conversation with Eileen's crew there, but
I just want to make sure it works, that if they can do it, if they can do all of it, they can put those things underground and have trees. We don't know that.
We don't know, the design of the piping hasn't been done.
Tom, you're sitting over there. I know you want to say something. Can I ask your opinion on that?
Certainly. For the record, Tom Smith, Chief of Current Planning, City of Annapolis Planning Department. I think I'm hearing two different things.
Do you have your microphone on?
Yes, sir, I do. I think I'm hearing the condition that spoke to the undergrounding of the utilities, the overhead wires adjacent to the buildings, which does have proposed trees and pits in that area and replacement of existing trees in that area. I think what Mr. Waldman is referring to is more in the center of that area where the parking spaces are, where there are sort of a web of utilities currently, water lines, sewer lines, storm drain lines, and so forth, that be designed in such a way that that space in the center parking lot, the utilities be designed to accommodate future trees. I think it's what I hear Mr. Waldman saying. It's different than the undergrounding of the overhead wires currently to today. And I have no problem with using the word native in there, because they should be, they're going to have to be, because it's in the critical area.
I definitely don't think that an arborist is necessary in
No,
this
sir.
conversation.
No, sir, that's fine.
And I think that the conversation that we had ad nauseum about moving the lines underground was the right conversation to have
Yeah.
about getting the approval for phase project 1.
Right.
The capacity for moving them underground was the right conversation to have, right? Widening the sidewalks, being able to move them underground,
Yes.
because we don't have the funding. We need to be able to move them underground. There's a mess underground, right? And that parking lot is not currently in the purview of Project 1 anyway. And once we lift up 10 years from now, 5 years from now, however, as fast as we can, because we would love to get rid of 20 parking spots now, because we know it's in the best interest of the future of the city, but that's not going to happen in Project 1. It's not in the purview of the decision that we just made. And I think that, talking about certainly the kind of trees that would be put in there, I know it's not paramount to the decision that we're making now. I think that the conversation that we already had and the decision that we made to ensure that the capacity for putting the lines underground is important. But I am curious about what's under that mess. And when we said that we will move the utilities underground, and when we do look at, because I want to put a park, I want to extend that park all the way out myself to Randall Street, because that's the right thing to do ultimately. I'm just asking your opinion. What do you think that looks like?
Well, again, separating the issues, the undergrounding of the overhead electric wires will likely go in a conduit under the sidewalk areas is typically what happens there, right? And be designed around the tree pits that are proposed today. Hopefully we can connect those tree pits or use civil cells or a device like that so we actually grow trees in those areas. I think that as you look at where storm drains and water lines and sewer lines go, that sort of bifurcate or bisect that parking lot is again a second engineering issue to look at, separate from the overhead wires. So I think the depth of those utilities will be important, right? Is can we plant over them, or how close could we plant to them? But there's so many other issues that Mr. Waldman mentioned that we haven't discussed or talked about. View sheds, boat show, all kinds of things will come into play in the future as we look at that area, taking it from parking spaces to perhaps a park. I don't know if I answered your question or not, Commissioner, but
Well, but one needs to plan now for that possibility, because if you
yes.
follow me now,
So I think some thought into the arrangement of the utilities.
Right. I'm not asking
is
for that.
Correct.
all I can say is that I feel I feel assured that it will be monitored by the design team to see that if it's possible that this gets done. Now, what I would agree to is some language that shall make reasonable efforts to get this done, rather than requiring that it get done, simply because we haven't, we may not have enough information at this point, which I understand. Do you follow me?
Right. You used the term "shall be" in your proposed condition, Mr. Chairman, right? So "shall" is a pretty strong term, rather than something less.
Right. Well, I'm willing to entertain changing it to that the placement shall be, that reasonable efforts
Okay.
shall be made to, designed to accommodate
Sounds like a good.
you follow me?
Sounds like a good lawyer term,
Yeah, I mean,
Mr. Chairman.
it's a warning shot, but, we're not in a position to demand it because we don't know enough at this point, but we are in a position to demand that at least they look at it. And if it's possible to get it done and to give the design team some ammunition against the engineering team, how's that sound?
Well, I think that's fair, sir.
All right, so let me take a look at it. The placement of the utilities.
Tommy, you got something to say? I can see it.
No, So I just wanted to know if that was, if that's something we can vote on without having the design team here to tell us if that's a possibility or not, to put the utilities underground and make space for, like, as he said, as Steve said, there could be a mess under there. So do you think that that is something that we can kind of move forward with without knowing?
I think, again,
And with the language, I think we can.
Yes,
With
I think
saying
you're-
that a reasonable look is taken at it, but we certainly can't say this needs to be done.
Okay. All right. Well, then I will, the motion will be modified to read as follows. Reasonable efforts shall be made. The reasonable efforts have to be made. How's that sound? Reasonable efforts shall be made to ensure that the placement of the utilities crossing under the Dock Street parking lot be designed to accommodate 2 to 4 native trees in a central park area in substantial compliance with the attached exhibit. Reasonable efforts shall be made to ensure that the placement be designed. So, with that modification, do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? You cannot vote because you weren't here at the hearings, okay? This is just, back off. All right, any further discussion on this? Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
nays? So we have 4.
I'll abstain.
3 to 1, 3 to 0, 3 to abstention, 3-0-1. Okay. Okay. So I will make sure that the clerk and the exhibits are placed in her hands. So now we can move on to whether the findings and opinion with these conditions, and by the way, I want to note before we move on, that at the top of the page of opinion and conditions, or the second paragraph, that 1, 2 through 13, which are the conditions specified in the staff report and are incorporated herein, just to make it absolutely clear that the 13 conditions are part of the conditions. Okay? Okay. All right. And everything else is as we discussed. Any edits, amendments, conditions, corrections to the findings and opinion? All in favor say aye.
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 No nays. All right, so that's 4-0. Okay, now we need to do some signing. I will sign and pass around. Today is the 7th day of March. Thank you. Can barely write.
Okay, thank you to the commissioners for that. There's more than 10 years of effort by literally hundreds of people gone into this project, so kudos.
I'll pass the whole thing around. Mr. Smith, we want to thank you for your 10 years of devotion to this project, and it's not done yet. Got it.
Yeah, I got it.
All right, that was the big news of tonight. Moving on to new business, we have an annual report, which is someplace at hand, that we, if I recall correctly, did vote on last time. If not, we can vote on it after discussion. I'd like to add to the discussion that Ms. Bell, our outside counsel, has, after becoming familiar with our work, may have some suggestions as to things that we can do to begin to add, to consider, first of all, and then possibly add to future annual reports. I look forward to that kind of memo of some things that she's caught over 6 or 9 months of discussion. Are there any modifications to the annual report? It's rather straightforward. It's attendance records and number of applications, legislative recommendations, that sort of thing.
Sign that again. I signed in the wrong place, but I had another copy.
Oh, God.
I signed Diane's. It says sign here.
Okay.
I don't look like Diane.
No.
I don't think. Look like Paul Rudd, maybe. Look like Mikey Day, but I don't look like Diane Butler. Pretty sure.
All right. Pass that along.
Thank you, sir. Official copy.
Thank you.
So this goes out.
Yeah, trash. Sorry. It's my jet lag eyes. I'm 48 hours in.
Go.
And I will sign for Mr. Pline.
Maybe have Quentin introduce himself to us.
All right. Signed, sealed, and almost delivered. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the Maritime Task Force Annual Report. And I understand that the Economic Development Director is here.
I'll take the promotion.
Oh, it's a promotion? All right, and please introduce yourself and make sure that the little green light is on any microphone that you use, okay?
Give us your real title when you introduce yourself.
Good evening. Stephen Rice, Economic Development Manager for the City of Annapolis.
The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. I believe you probably have the report in front of you, but if you are looking for it, it has a number of pretty colors, in case you're trying to find it.
Is this, excuse me, is this a report dated 2022 and it's just a spreadsheet with listing of properties? Or is there another
yes,
report?
and
I have a
some
feeling
numbers.
that this is your preliminary report. We don't have your full report.
That is my full report. That is not preliminary.
Oh,
Yeah, if there's an additional information that you need, I can possibly provide it, but my report is a quantitative report.
oh, the reason I ask is because under the legislation, it talks about establishing fees and certain information that you were supposed, you know, the economic development and planning and zoning director would get to the planning commission so that by no later than December 31st of 2023, the planning commission could make its recommendations on changes to the use tables to city council. So we haven't been able, obviously, to do that since we haven't had any of the information. So at some point, obviously, we're going to need the information called for in this report, including, issues about the health of the maritime industry, how far you've gotten in recruiting maritime businesses, and all the other things. I mean, obviously, we spent days and days and days on this, and many, many people testified. We had the who's who of the maritime industry. So we were hoping for a robust report that talks about many of the things that were discussed. So this looks very good in terms of preliminary information. We're just wondering when the entire package would come before us so we could make our recommendations to City Council. Because this is just a listing of properties with very sparse information.
So I'll get with the director and we'll circle back.
Perfect, thank you.
That sounds good. So in the meantime, let's look at what we have tonight.
Absolutely. So in accordance with O2521 and R5422, the Department of Planning and Zoning identified 47 properties that needed to provide annual reporting for the this maritime report. One property was eliminated from the list because we figured out it was publicly owned, and reports were received from 21 properties. That's a 46% response rate. Of those 21 properties, 77% of the space was used for maritime businesses, 15% non-maritime use, and 7% of the space was unleased. The total square footage was 162,615 square feet. We also received additional information from 7 properties that we hadn't actually specifically asked for information on, but with some of the properties being rather large and having multiple addresses, it actually, the information was very useful. And in one instance in particular, what we asked for and what we received later on actually added a lot of value. So
Do we have that information, or is that not on here?
you do.
Oh, it's on here.
Yes, it's at the bottom. So 61% of the properties combined, the old and the new, were maritime uses. 26% non-maritime uses, 8% was unleased, and 4% was restaurant countered by enumerated uses.
Restaurant, excuse me, what restaurant, what?
Restaurant countered by enumerated uses.
Countered by?
Countered
Countered
by enumerated uses.
Can you explain what that means?
I cannot very well, but the properties and, well, the spaces in particular are, let's see, at Annapolis City Marina, Carroll's Creek, and Chart House was the other property.
And that's the 4% you're talking about?
Yes.
So what were they again?
Chart House and Carroll's Creek, as I recall.
And Carroll's Creek is in Annapolis City Marina, which I think the address there is,
It's, I believe, 410-7.
What was the classification again?
Restaurant countered by enumerated uses.
Mr. Arnett, I see you sitting over there. Can you give us a stab in the dark at that one?
No.
I bet you can.
I know what it means, but I'm not sure.
I'm just thinking of those properties, and I'm thinking about the use case for them, and I can take some guesses at it. I'm just curious. It's not really pertinent to the conversation.
Restaurants were approved by resolution by the city council. And it is a question mark as to whether or not they're counted as maritime or not. I believe they are counted as maritime, but Mr. Rice seems to be indicating that they don't count as maritime. I'm not sure where that's coming from.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, as I understand it, it's a separate category outside of maritime, non-maritime, or unleased.
Okay. Thank you.
And a couple of things. We sent letters, we sent a letter in December of 2022 requesting information from the maritime property owners. We sent a follow-up letter in April of 2023 requesting the same information from those that were non-compliant. This first year, and getting this information was extremely challenging, I'll say. I think for a number of reasons. Number one, this is a new requirement that the property owners had not heard of before and didn't know much about, so it required a lot of explanation. Also, I think there, to a certain extent, is maybe even a disincentive for reporting, because if you are above a certain threshold, then you actually have to pay into the Maritime Industry Fund. And so that's also pretty much a financial disincentive. Now, it's not a significant amount of money by any stretch. It's $1 per square foot. So we're definitely not breaking the bank for any of these larger properties. But that's just the reality. It was very challenging, and a lot of phone calls, emails, and of course, follow-ups. Yes.
So I'm a new guy, and I know Quentin is over there. And I don't know if you're well-read on maritime law here in Annapolis City. Could you explain to me, kind of in a very summary form, what those requirements are for meeting those thresholds and how they can subsidize them if they don't meet them?
So I actually have a chart that explains all this, and
I should probably know those, but I was just asking if you could give me like a down and dirty 30 seconds. This is what they're supposed to do, and this is what's not really happening, and this is how they can make up.
Sure.
This is how they can make amends for it.
So in the WMM district, the maximum, let me back up. There are triggers and there are also incentives. And my chart explains this fairly well, and I don't remember all of the percentages, but I will try to work through it. In the WMM district, I do know this, the non-maritime percentage is capped at 55%. In the WME district is 20%, and WMI it's also 20%. And I don't know that there is anything specific for WMC. If a property meets certain requirements, and one of them I know is I think a 30-ton boat lift, and different things that pretty much only larger properties that are fairly active with regard to boats and so forth can make, then they can increase their non-maritime percentage. And then in addition to that, there are specific incentives that if you take advantage of those percentage, you can increase your non-maritime percentage even more. There are two categories of incentives. I do have a little bit of that in front of me, so I will read it. Category 1 can increase your incentive by 5%. It's if you have a water taxi, landing area, you provide public water access, you have recreational water access, or you have a crabbing and or fishing facility, you can increase your non-maritime percentage. And for category 2, which can increase your non-maritime percentage by 10%, you have to have either 150 on-site parking spaces, or you can pay $250,000 into I'll just say a fund that supports parks, street-end parks, or you can have a community boating facility. So there are just certain things that you can do that will enable you to increase your non-maritime percentage. Yeah.
Makes our 31 zoning categories look really simple. Amazing. Okay, thank you.
Are there any specific properties who have taken advantage of these incentives?
So there, I believe so. Not in 2022, but I believe 2023 will reflect that. But we're actively collecting information from 2023, so I'm not quite ready to report anything at this point.
And when do you think you will be?
Well, the response has been a little bit easier this year, but there's still a lot of follow-up. I'm hoping by May, I'll have, a pretty good report that I can share.
How many properties are we talking about?
46 properties.
Yeah. Because it sounds like it's kind of really difficult on one hand, but on the other hand, it's really only 46 properties. So this shouldn't be really difficult. In fact, this should be a really collaborative effort to help them, help us, and we should be helping them help themselves, especially if there's incentives involved.
Well, in fact,
If there's rules and then there's incentives, this shouldn't be hard, right? There's rules and there's incentives, and it shouldn't be hard. I'd like to help you help them.
I appreciate it. One of the challenges too is that the owners of some of these properties, many of them, don't live nearby. It's an LLC. We get the information through SSTAT. It's PO boxes and that sort of thing. So it's not, you can't necessarily reach out and touch the owners pretty easily for many of these properties.
Well, and there's 46 properties, and you just gave me 23 different kind of regulations or opportunities to work around within and so forth. So it's complicated, but maybe more so than it should be. I don't know if that's within our purview.
As I look down here, though, it appears like many of these are simply residential addresses.
There were a few that slipped through the cracks, but most of them are not, as I recall.
Okay, well, let's go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 105 Eastern Avenue. I don't know where that is. What is that? Why? We don't know what that is. We don't know if
we
that's
don't have any, that would be helpful to have.
We don't know if it's a marina or a residential building.
Without a
13,000 square
map
feet. It's a big
or
property.
GIS, I couldn't tell you what that is either.
I think any kind of report that's going to be meaningful to us will have that kind of information. You're going to say, this is Annapolis City Marina, this is SAYC, this is Yacht Haven. These are all the big players that came in and talked to us, and they were really part of the whole, it was months and months and the who's who of the maritime industry. So I'm sure that information is, even on the maps that were in this, the task force report, it's there. So is there any way to just put that information?
I'm not sure that that's in that report.
Because we need to separate out what are actually maritime, the properties that we should be focusing on, let's put it that way. Certainly the big marinas, and then there's a few office buildings that are, that are thrown in, but I can't tell, what this is.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's Horn Point Marina. It's Horn Point offices and Marina 105. But that would be really good to put Horn Point Marina and.
We knew exactly what it was.
Yeah, and then the same thing, and it looks like 750 Boucher Ave, which I believe is SAYC, hasn't reported. Is that even possible? Is that
Let's see, which one is that?
750, it's in blue and it says return to sender. They were, as the task force referred to them, the bad actors, but they were so vocal and they're trying to, increase the size of their non-maritime space in a very aggressive way. So for them not to respond seems a little.
There are a couple of addresses that, as I recall, are AYC addresses.
Yep, that's another one.
And I don't quite feel comfortable talking about specific properties and property owners. Particularly as I'm trying to get information from them this year. But there are a few addresses for AYC, as I recall.
No, we're not talking about AYC, right?
I thought you said AYC.
No, SAYC.
Oh, okay.
That's the one that says return to
Okay.
sender, and that's what, it was a little odd since they were very involved with this whole process.
Is that the Bay Shore Avenue address?
No, 750 Boucher Ave. And it says return to sender, so it appears, this could be wrong, of course, it's dated 2022, and it's, who knows? It's not, there's not a lot of information to go on here.
That means that we sent a letter to the property owner and it was returned.
No, I understand that, but I'm just saying, so they haven't, as an aside, even given us any information, and they were very, very involved.
That's a very important address. There are compliance penalties, are there not?
There are a number of tools, as I recall, that the Director of Planning and Zoning has that can be used to deal with properties that are not compliant.
Okay. We'll return to SAYC.
Right. I have another question, though, about, like, what happens if they don't respond? It says all property owners within WMM, WMI, WME, and WMC shall provide annual listings of maritime uses to the City of Annapolis Economic Development Manager in such form as he may be able to promulgate from time to time to the Director of Planning and Zoning. So what is the penalty if they decide not to give you the information?
I don't recall exactly what's in the code, but there are a few things that the Director of Planning and Zoning, as I recall, has at his or her disposal to deal with non-compliant properties.
So in order for us to get a full report, we need to get them to comply, to get this information together so we can make our recommendations. So maybe we can figure out, or maybe you can help us figure out how to do that. Because I feel uncomfortable making recommendations and findings for City Council unless we have that information. And then the other information about your recruitment efforts, how has that gone?
We launched a maritime recruiting page. We've been active with various conferences and so forth. I can get back to you with more details, but we've been trying to be pretty robust when it comes to recruiting.
Have you tried to reach out to other maritime businesses and see if they'd be interested in moving to Annapolis?
We have,
wanna help.
but nobody local.
Nobody what?
Nobody local.
Yeah, I don't want to punish them.
Right. So that's a lot of, people were soliciting some of our businesses to move out of town, and two almost did. So we're wondering, are we doing the same thing? And if so, how are we going about it?
So the answer is yes, but from an economic development standpoint, economic developers don't recruit from neighboring or even any jurisdictions within Maryland if you work in economic development, because if we steal businesses from Baltimore, then they're just going to try to steal businesses from us. So that's a kind of a professional courtesy. But of course, reaching out to businesses outside of the state is something that we can and we do.
Have you done any? Who have you
And just so that I'm clear, there are property owners in neighboring jurisdictions and even within Anne Arundel County that may reach out to Annapolis-based businesses and try to incentivize them to move. I know that there have been some businesses that have been approached by, property owners in Kent Narrows and that sort of thing. But these are property owners and brokers who are doing that, not economic developers. That's not something that
This was an
that we
economic
can do.
development person from a little town in France who was trying to get a cluster of yacht designers. And so they were reaching out and making it very, very interesting if they would move their businesses. I'm just wondering, how creative are we being to get maritime businesses here?
Well, we do reach out to businesses. We try to listen to the maritime community and ask them what businesses would add value to the maritime cluster that we have here. And then if they provide information to us that, this business would be great, or this is something that's new and shiny, then, we will definitely reach out to those businesses and try to bring them.
So how has that
to
gone over the
Annapolis.
last 2.5 years? I'm just wondering, because this is what part of the report says, that you have to provide information on the report regarding the efforts to recruit maritime businesses.
So
in the report-
I was not prepared to provide a report today on that. I can circle back to you and provide you with some specific information, data, anecdotal information, whatever you would like. But I just don't have that in front of me. So.
No, thank you. I mean, this is very preliminary, obviously, and it's great to have some of this information. But according to the code, these are the things that we're hoping to get from your report so we can do our thing, which is report to the City Council. So thank you.
Sure.
What clusters of maritime activity have you found to be worthy of enlargement or that you're focusing on? What clusters do you think could be developed more? You say, what
Yeah,
sorts
so-
of activities are the kinds of things that you're looking at that would fit well into Annapolis?
Well, what I would love to see is a maritime. I won't. How do I say this? What I think would add value to the city of Annapolis, and in particular the maritime community, and this is also something that I shared with the Maritime Task Force. I think it would be wonderful if we actually had a blue tech or a maritime tech incubator here in the city. And I think this is something that we could do that not only plays upon our existing strengths and our existing competitive advantage, but also leads us and provides access for us to own the future. And in particular, when it comes to maritime tech or blue tech, and we actually had a study done for planning and zoning to provide some insight into this, there are three sort of avenues when it comes to businesses that have been growing within this space. One is offshore seafood farming businesses. The other is they're businesses that are focused on cleaning up ocean plastic waste. And then the third is seaborne vehicles that are unmanned. So just like we have drones that are pilotless, these would be underwater and surface vehicles that are sailorless. And so this is something that is growing, not just with the Navy, but it's a growing industry worldwide. So that's something that I think would be, incredible in the city of Annapolis, given the fact that we have a strong maritime community, we have a lot of history, we have the Naval Academy, and again, we can play on our existing strengths in our maritime cluster, but also with an eye towards the future and integrate into things such as big data, cloud, IoT, et cetera, et cetera. So that's just something that I'd be really excited about.
Don't the first two of those three that you mentioned require fairly substantial industrial port
This is
acreage?
before my time.
Well, if it's an incubator, I don't think so. I think the biggest thing that we would need is obviously water access. We would need of course, adequate funding. We would probably need a university partner to provide branding and to provide research, the research component, and that sort of thing. And of course, we would need to tap into the venture capital community and that sort of thing. So there's a. I'm sorry,
Tell me your name again.
Stephen Rice.
Stephen Rice. I'm Stephen Riley. So your energy level went from like here to here when he asked you that question. Like it went from compliance and what are we doing and who's not doing what and what percentage of what are we not doing right to what could we be doing, and your energy level went to here. So clearly you were hired for a reason, and the energy level that you bring for what we could be doing is why you're in the position that you are. So I'm more excited to talk to you about what we could be doing with the 46 spaces that are there. So I'm excited to hear more about that. And then
Yeah, I'm
Diane just handed me something that clearly they've been talking about before I got here. This is already happening, so.
Well, in 2021, after many, many meetings with the task force, they identified primary and priority actions. And some of those actions are exactly what Mr. Rice is talking about, the Blue Tech Maritime Incubator. And some of the timing, the responsible party for many of these happens to be the Economic Development Department. And the timing was between 1 and 6 months. And so it's interesting, we're coming back to it now, but I'm just how did any of this go? All of these blue tech ideas and all the exciting things that were discussed during the task force presentations. I'm very excited to hear how it's gone. So that's what we're waiting for, that report.
Well, a lot of this gets caught up in bureaucracy and policy and percentages and reports.
No, but there's probably a lot that's been done, I would imagine, because, you should go back and watch some of these meetings. They were on fire about these ideas, some of the ideas that he just identified. There were these, especially this blue tech stuff. People want to do it. So maybe there's more here than meets the eye, and it'll be in the report, maybe, hopefully.
Can I go back to what we have in front of us?
Sure.
Back to compliance.
Boring, right?
Sorry.
You want my energy level to
Keep it here. Keep
Please
it here,
stay
man.
awake.
You can do it.
Top line, lawyer requests removal from required annual submission. And now that, you're right, that is not the only entry for Annapolis Yacht Club, but can you expand on what that comment means?
really just what it says. Their lawyer reached out
Okay, but
and
what's the address? What is it referring to? 2 Compromise Street.
That is AYC, I think, right?
Okay.
Right.
But
Yeah.
then there's other AYCs, 6th Street and
They do have-
Severn Avenue.
They have several locations.
Those are the locations across the creek. Okay, so were they excused from an annual submission?
no. But their lawyer, as I recall, and I don't have the letter in front of me, but the essence of it was, this is all maritime, and because it's all maritime, we don't feel as if we need to report on this. We don't have any non-maritime, that sort of thing. And
Okay.
please, stop sending us letters.
But we wouldn't just say okay, right? Because I have to report every year business stuff I don't like to report. I can't say, don't send this to me anymore.
I haven't said okay, and no
Right.
one has told me to say okay.
Right.
So let me go. Are there other marinas that have restaurant facilities in them?
Yes.
Are they excused from submission?
Nobody is excused from submission.
And if they have other restaurant facilities, they count the square foot of their restaurant banquet facilities and separate it out from their specifically maritime uses? Right? They separate them. The restaurant is not a maritime use simply because it has windows that look on the water, is it?
I think that's the other remuneration.
Yeah, I don't believe a restaurant would. So that actually goes back to I think defining maritime and non-maritime, and I'm not dodging your question, but I think there probably could be better guidance with regard to making those determinations and defining maritime and non-maritime, because as there are a lot of businesses that are either on the edges of maritime or, facilitate maritime, but I just think there could be, more guidance in making those kinds of determinations.
Well, I think that's
Can I keep this?
crucial
Because there's a lot of good stuff.
to,
I'll give you this too.
and I frankly do not understand what restaurant countered by enumerated uses. I have no idea what that means, but I'm suspecting that it's an attempt to deal with this actual issue, and it's a crucial issue. So perhaps when you come back for our early April meeting, you could wrestle with those clarifying those distinctions and definitions, because they're going to get to be important. Okay?
And also labeling some of at least the larger players in this, all the folks that, are the big marinas that are pushing for the change, all of that. We just like to know what those addresses are.
Yeah, we've got to have some idea of the big players. And because there's so many addresses here that just, I don't know what they are. So let me continue down. The Waterfront Hotel, the Horn Point, that's a marina, Horn Point Marina.
Yes.
Okay. 110 Severn Avenue, return to sender. What is 110 Severn Avenue?
I don't have these properties memorized. Yeah,
Do you
I'm sorry.
understand?
I'll
I'll take you off the spot right now, but you see where we're having trouble with this?
Sure. If you would like for me to come back and try to identify, these properties and particularly the big players,
Can I?
Yeah.
Can
I will do my best to do so.
Can I ask a question? I don't mean to interrupt you. Take us out to the 30,000-foot view, just in terms of why you're here. On the, you're bringing the quantitative information, but the summary of, like, what would you like to tell us about this report without us drilling into the micro? What's the macro picture of what you want to tell us here, and what's the big takeaway that we can then, kind of ponder beyond this meeting,
So
rather than drilling into the line by line?
Sure. My takeaway would be I don't believe that there is enough here to make any sort of recommendations. And I don't think that there's enough here to have any significant takeaways. We had a 46% response rate, which means, obviously 54%, the majority, did not respond. And so, and in addition to that, because the reports kind of come in on a rolling basis and tranches, and in response to me sending emails or making phone calls for those that haven't submitted them, it's not exactly, although it's intended to be a snapshot in time, in reality, it's not quite. And although I'm asking for information that's from last year, I hope that's what I'm getting, especially when you get it several, months sometimes later. So I just don't think that we have enough information with which to make any sort of determinations based upon what we were able to gather from last year. Well, I'll say from 2022. Hopefully, with more robust reporting, this year we'll have more information with which to make some maybe substantive recommendations. That's my takeaway.
And that's useful. Would you recommend that the Planning Commission, therefore, also hold off on making any recommendations to the City Council?
I would.
Thanks, because I think we need to just report that to the City Council, because we're mandated under this ordinance to report to City Council. We've already missed our deadline. We just need to have someone show up and say that under the recommendation of the Economic Development Management Manager and Planning and Zoning, we don't have any recommendations at this time.
There are three categories that I think we'd be looking for at the next meeting. The Maritime Industry Fund, what was collected, perhaps bring your chart about thresholds and provide it to us well in advance so we can absorb it, okay? Because it will explain to several of the commissioners who were not, three of them, who were not involved in the rezoning effort. So that would help. And the money that was collected, who's taken advantage of it? And in what ways have they taken advantage? Give us some general idea of whether the incentives are working and whether the fund is actually up and running. Help us out with recruitment and sort of just explain what you think are the real goal targets, what's been successful, what you think has been unsuccessful, and maybe why it's been unsuccessful, to get us some idea of whether trying to be a host to offshore farming is realistic and what might be required to become realistic. Just talk about it a little bit so that it becomes part of the population, the conversation. And the third thing is to help us with this chart and maybe divide it into something like, and help me out here, fellows, into, what are simply residences that are not really applicable here? What are businesses that are on the waterfront? What are marinas that are on the waterfront? And expand, in your comment section on the right-hand side, help us out so that we can identify the major players and what the gaps are. Are those fair requests?
Sure.
And I would add the overall health of the industry, which is part of the code requirement under Section 2, because we have this maritime economic report that I think you gave at one of the original meetings, and it's just simply amazing how many jobs and how many boat slips we have and how many employees, $270 million in employee compensation from Anne Arundel County, and then 8,600 jobs, $416 million in employee compensation, basically 1.2 billion annual economic activity. So an update would be great. Is the maritime industry getting better after COVID? Is it worse? How's it doing? And again, that's part of the requirements of the reporting of the code. 2125.
And then on your behalf, we'll start to report this to council, and so that they could take a look at what needs to be done and maybe what doesn't need to be done.
You said 46 properties, but there was a lot of are they subject to different rules?
Some are in different districts. Yeah. But maybe it would be helpful too. I'll have copies of the Maritime Task Force report and the legislation as well.
So
Might be
because
helpful.
what Bob was just asking, just in terms of the, just like knowing, I mean, whether it's residential or commercial, obviously that's a big one, but who's subject to what rules? Knowing what the 46 are, being a lot more strategic about if part of the mandate of part of the opportunity is to identify having the right players in those 46 properties, then obviously you want to know what the rules are and who the best players are so that you can go out and identify the right ones and put the right ones in place. The percentages will fall in line accordingly. Knowing how to put them in the right categories so that if there's different rules for the different 46 properties, let's put say there's four different categories of rules. I don't know how many there are. It sounds like there's a lot, but 12 different, there's 10 in this one and there's 5 in this one, and there's 5 in this one, and you could split this up. And that would just help me really be able to understand where do each one of these fall? And then when you're looking at the response rate, the fact that 46% of them are responding, that's not acceptable. You can throw a fine at them for not responding.
Yeah, that was my question.
We can't even do
earlier.
our job
What can we do?
without the response rate. So I don't want to be pedantic. I'm a new guy, but to tell me, let's wait another year until we get a better response rate without anything changing. We're just going to try again, ask the same people the same thing next time, and hopefully we'll get a different response, is silly. That's silly. You won't get a different response. And therefore, for us to recommend to Ross and company nothing is a waste of time. You're just wasting time. It's a waste of time.
All right, well, let's not waste time. So,
I'd rather tell Ross something. So let's get a better response rate. So what I would say is go back to you and go back to your boss and go back to Gavin and everybody and say, let's say we need a minimum of 70% response, and that's your goal. We would recommend that the city gets a 70% response. That way we can use the data actively, and then we can make a active recommendation to the council however, this time next year. But then having those breakdown of, like, there's only 46 properties. It doesn't seem like it would be a lot for us to make some kind of really,
Right, some of them are small, irrelevant, they don't really need to report, but we do need to know what are the important ones to report.
and what Bob was just showing me, like, there's some big properties, right? And then there's some small properties. So the big ones seem to be the important ones. We definitely need to get those responses.
Well, I think they're all important. I think that it goes without saying that if you own a maritime property in Eastport, it's important.
Yeah.
Or, and not, you know, in the city, I shouldn't just say Eastport, any of these zones. So I think we need a better response rate. I agree with that.
And let me,
I completely agree we need a better response rate. That's,
I think we're-
there's no pushback from me on that, and we work very diligently to get to the 46%, believe it or not.
I'm not admonishing you or anything. I'm just saying, like, we can't do our job if you guys can't do your job.
Sure.
And then they can't do their job. And then it's just like this endless cycle of
and let me.
nobody doing their job.
Our job, there may be efforts to change some of the zones and some of the uses permissible in the zones. And I think would be important on us to understand better what's going on inside these maritime facilities as to whether that zone, whether we would recommend approval or disapproval of those zoning changes. Do you follow me? So it's not just writing a report, but I can see down the road that we really need to, we need as a planning commission need to understand a little better about what's going on and how those zoning changes might affect the maritime industry positively or negatively.
Agreed.
Okay, good. So I can't remember what the first Thursday in April is, but mark it down on your calendar. I will do my best to put you high on the agenda in case it's a busy agenda, because we need to finish this. I would ask that anything that you produce, that you get to us, you know, at least a week beforehand, so that I can get it distributed and we have a chance to absorb it. Fair enough?
Sounds good.
Sounds good. Mr. Rice, thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. I'll see you again. Thanks a lot. All right. Okay. I have no communications to make, I don't think. I've asked Mr. Jakubiec to give me some idea of what's coming down the pike so that we can, you know, work with the agenda so that we can be productive and we're not overloaded at any one particular point. I've already mentioned what Ms. Bell might provide us, which is some homework, some cleaning up kinds of things, some suggestions that she has into process. And I don't think that I have anything else to add. Does anybody else have anything to add? We will be looking next time for an opinion on the, I don't know if you recall, a discussion we had about extensions to special exceptions that had been granted by the Board of Appeals. And we had a pretty insightful discussion on what our particular recommendations were in terms of somebody gets an extension that they need to comply with any new any changes to building or codes or regulations or anything like that, so that it's not 2 years out and they're working on old stuff. And I keep in mind that I think the same thing ought to happen with approvals that have been granted by the Planning Commission, because you've got stuff like Rocky Gorge now sitting out there for I don't know how many years, and things have changed. And so I think that asking for legislation to clean it up for us as well might be in order. Just the thoughts off the top of my head. There's some changes to the Forest Conservation Act, which arose because of the Providence, by the way, it's been appealed to what used to be called the Court of Special Appeals. I don't even know what it's called. The Appellate Court of Maryland, it's now called.
Does that surprise you?
No, it doesn't surprise me because somebody's got money. It's the same issues that were raised and decided by Judge Crooks. But there were some things that came up that needed decision, and somehow I'm gonna try to get Office of Law to work with maybe Diane and anybody who wants to join in a very small group, just to hammer it out, clean it up, and then get it, into the council and to us. Pretty wonky stuff. Anything else that anybody would like to bring up?
I noticed that our rules that are on the website are from 2013.
No, we have newer ones. Oh,
I know we do, but what I found on the website when I was looking for something else recently was, we have, number one, the listing of our members is outdated, but then also the rules are outdated. So we have to get the rules that we worked on and passed in 2021 updated on the website. And I know you don't do that, but I would recommend that we give it to, I don't know, who is it that would be updating?
no, well, I'll give it to Ms. Consoli and
Okay.
see what, no, talking about rules, actually, this is one other thing. I thought about providing everybody here with a copy of our rules and maybe in a notebook. Would this be helpful to you, like a 3-ring notebook? And if there's anything like really important that you want to start adding to your notebook, or or am I just being an anachronistic old man?
I think that would be helpful.
Actually, I have a lot of stuff that
Okay.
I do pile up. Whether or
I
not
use my laptop for all my notes.
I don't have like a 3-ring
Yeah, I know. I don't have a
punch
binder
thing
anymore
anymore,
either.
so
I'm
I
getting
just
rid
kind
of
of
paper.
stuff it in. But
Okay, well, I'm going to provide you with a notebook anyway, with a copy of the rules and some dividers, and you can do with it what you want. But I think we
could
should
fax
just be
it to me.
we should just be comfortable with those rules and not rely on me to, say what the rules are. Is that fair?
yeah,
Very fair.
that
And
is fair.
I also think the Open Meetings Act would be a good thing to have too, because I thought for a long time that it was like the administrative person that serves our body that is responsible for that. And I was reading the act a little more closely, and no, we are responsible.
We are. We're actually.
I understand
When you
that-
texted me yesterday, I was like, what?
Coming down the
About
pike,
the rule. And I was like, let's talk
coming
about
down
it.
the
But I
pike
did
is going to
talk
be a training for all
Beth.
boards and commissions on the Open Meetings Act.
Great.
So that'll happen sometime.
Yes, and there's briefing books for each,
In the what?
and the briefing books for each.
I can't, well, same rules. apply to
Briefing
you.
books. There will be briefing books for all the
Turn your
commissioners.
microphone on so we can hear you.
Briefing books.
She said that we will have briefing books for all the commissioners.
Okay. All right. All right.
Perfect.
If there's nothing else, the classic motion for adjournment will be entertained.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on that one? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. Okay.